Hi everyone. So before I start, I actually had a dedication for this talk. Three themes that I've been carrying around and I've been feeling a lot during the last couple of weeks. The first one, the first one is actually Lil Nas X. So as a gay space cowboy, I'm just really feeling the energy and the work that he's exposing into the mainstream world. Also my father, who is a construction worker, so if you see a worker on the road in Houston with a bright neon green shirt, if you see them, please, slow down, pay attention to their signs, and take a little moment of gratitude for the labor and the work that they do in building the city around us. And lastly, Gemaya for mothering me for the last couple of weeks and helping me in my journey to, as I continue and have for most of my life mothered everyone around me, trying to find and allow that space for me to be cared for and for my healing to also be part of the work that I do. Thank you. So again, I'm José Eduardo Sánchez. I'm going to be talking today about food as language and methodology of confrontation in the context of placemaking and third word. But first, a little bit about how I got here, right? This is me, and I usually do workshop facilitation, so I'm moving around and I want to be in the space. So just in case, just to give you a heads up. I'm a queer immigrant artist, cultural organizer, language worker, and popular educator. My social practice invites communities to create, transform, confront, and reclaim spaces by experimenting with the alchemy of food, language, memory, and other forms of life-making as a way to prefigure and actualize collective healing, justice, and liberation. I know that's a lot of words, and as someone who works with language, I'm always invested in being able to be understood. So I'm just going to talk about what I feel that means and what that means for me. I was born in a small rural town in Guanajuato, Mexico, and I migrated to the US at age 9 with my family here in Houston. So Houston is home. Houston is where I found community. Houston is where I've really become politicized and also just found different ways to connect with the world as myself, and that's who I really am and want to be. But at the same time, that's how I feel about Houston right now. That's not always been the case. About 2 years, back in 2016, I actually moved to LA. And I was, I had a job, I wanted to be in a new city, but really what I realized was that I was running away from Houston, and I was running away from the life that I was living here. And a lot of it, and I just cannot say enough gratitude to Nicoleta for what she's already brought into the space, but similarly, I was in a situation where the work that I was doing was eating me up alive, and I was not able to be who I was or even explore who I wanted to be because I was too caught up in this sort of cycle of not only doing social justice organizing work, but doing it through a nonprofit industrial complex, and also doing it as working with communities who were my communities, who I was that community, right? I've been organizing with domestic workers, with restaurant workers, with construction workers here in Houston and across the US, and that's my dad, that's my mom, that's my brother, that's my sister, those are my cousins, that's the neighbors and the people that I grew up with. So to me, it was never a job. To me, it was always part of what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And I still think that, but I think just in many, many different ways. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to be talking a lot about food and language, and those two things are really present in the work that I do, and just in my realization of this project in particular. You're going to see a lot of that. And so I think of this, I spent 2 years in LA, so I did end up moving. I ended up coming back, I might say probably worse than when I left. But that actually gave me the opportunity to finally get that healing that I was looking for, get that space for myself that I was looking for. And one of the first things that I did, since I quit my job, I didn't have another full-time job. I wasn't really interested in working full-time at all, much less at any sort of institution. So I still needed to pay rent and pay my bills. So I started doing two things. One is that I started a catering business with my sister, where we did a lot of work recreating recipes from our mom and grandmother and aunts, while working, still connected to a lot of the communities that I was organizing with. And I even went to culinary school. I enrolled in culinary school at HTC. I was thinking, wow, this is something that I really want to do. And I started interpreting and translating as part of Antenna Houston. I've been interpreting and translating since I was 9 years old, and I came to the US, and I was interpreting for my mom at the hospital. But professionally for the last 10 years, and so that was another way that I was making money. And I thought, well, that's great. I'm getting paid to cook for people, and I'm getting paid to interpret and translate, which are both things that I love. But at the same time, while that was that created the space for me to arrive where I am right now, I realized that in and of itself wasn't the end for me. In fact, it was only the very, very beginning of where I actually wanted to go with my work, where I actually wanted to go with my social practice and my impact being back in Houston. So, I'm going to talk about a couple of the projects that I did in LA. So this is one called The Worker Body, Food Justice and Language Justice. This is part of a public engagement residency that Antena Los Angeles, which I was part of when I was in LA, and Antena Aire, its sister collective, were part of at the Hamner Museum at UCLA. And it was, there were many different iterations of the public engagement community events, but this one in particular focused on food justice. And food, not just from the point of view of like this mythical thing that we love to romanticize, but also not just at the level of sustenance, but particularly through the entry point of labor, the labor and work that goes into getting our food to us, right? Everything from growing the food to the people who are making it, so we can actually have access to that type of sustenance. So we worked again, and then I did in Los Angeles. Another social artist project called Cocina Abierta. They do experimental theater performance, working particularly with restaurant and kitchen workers. They actually work mostly with back of the house folks, and they use this sort of the performance piece as a way for workers to connect and take collective action, but also to be able to process and engage in this collective healing about what they have to go through in the back of the house at all the restaurants throughout LA, right? And also with an organization called Rock LA, a Restaurant Opportunity Center. They're more of a traditional sort of advocacy, policy organizing group. But again, that was sort of what we wanted to highlight. And for me, it was really important to be in this space. My entry point, again, was language. I was interpreting this and many of the other public engagement events. But as I kept participating in that, I realized that one, I was seeing parts of myself and parts of what I wanted to be doing in that work, but at the same time, there were questions that I had that were not being answered by that work, that were not being included in that work, and that I wanted to find a way to figure it out, right? This is an image. I don't know if anyone and folks can tell or, yeah, so this is from the 1992 LA uprising in Koreatown. And so when I moved to LA, I was working in Koreatown. That was my community, that was who I was organizing with, that was what also was paying me to be there. And I chose this picture in particular because for folks who don't know, during April 1992 LA uprising, following the verdict of the Rodney King trial, just a whole, I could spend hours talking about this, and I'm not going to talk about it because it's not my story, but this in particular, these are two business owners in Koreatown, as you can see with guns, and the caption for the picture was, this Korean business owners protecting their business, right? And I think that a lot of what the narrative was, both around that time and even now, about the LA uprising included a lot of the conflict and the tension between Korean and Black and brown communities, particularly Korean. It portrayed the Korean community as business owners, and it portrayed the Black and brown Latinx and African American community in South LA, in particular as rioters, as looters, as folks who were, trying to take advantage of the situation. But what's really interesting is that the work that I went to LA to do, I was working with an organization that started basically within a week of the LA uprising was to build solidarity among Korean immigrant workers, Latinx immigrant workers, who were the folks employed by these Korean business owners and who were actually the majority of the time severely exploited, not being paid for their work, being sexually harassed, being threatened with immigration, etc. Right? So there was this whole dynamic that I kind of fell into as I was like, well, I'm gonna get a job organizing in LA, great, whatever, it'll be fine. But I actually came not only at this specific space and place, but also around the time when the 25th anniversary of the LA uprising was taking place, right? So I think, so that led to the next project that I'm going to share about. So this is 1992, The Fires That Still Burn. And this was about a 6-month documentation project that really was focused on grappling with the legacies of anti-blackness, xenophobia, and division that resulted over the last 25 years. And also challenging the community, right, to continue thinking about what that healing and solidarity can look like. Not only between Koreatown and South LA, but also between Black, Latinx, and Asian communities in general. And I started working with a lot of community members, workers, business owners, activists, folks who had been living during the LA uprising to collect not just stories, but also pictures, artifacts, and just put together bit by bit, right? And I think as someone who was 4 years old when this happened, was also living out of the country, so I didn't even have sort of like this cultural or historical concept of it. It was really challenging to go in and try to understand this entire, both the events of the LA uprising, but also the whole history behind it and up to it. But at the same time, I think that gave me an opportunity to be more of a facilitator and someone who could guide our process. So for other folks who both could answer those questions, but more importantly, were the ones asking and participating in that conversation, right? In the culmination of the documentation project occurred in a public event that, again, continued that conversation and allowed folks to kind of brought together the different pieces, right, that were part of this process. A lot of the documentation process included one-on-one interviews, or going to people's houses, or going to people's businesses, but this actually brought in like hundreds of community members, right? Both people who had participated, but also people who were just interested or wanted to learn more. And we displayed all of the different artifacts and photos around, but also not only wanted to reflect on the last 25 years since the LA uprising, but also thinking forward. What do the next 25 years look like? What are we actually, because what I learned and what a lot of people reflected on is that unfortunately, although you can rebuild a store, you can move to another house, you can pave a road, you cannot just that simply fix all of the underlying issues that led to the LA uprising, right? That were way more complicated than people burning stores or people looting, et cetera, right? So I think that was part of the conversation that I was hoping would happen and actually ended up happening. It was a fully interpreted Korean, English, and Spanish conversation, which again was amazing to be able to sit across someone who, a Korean immigrant who doesn't speak either English or Spanish, talk to a recent a worker from a restaurant who just came from Oaxaca, who also doesn't speak English, but whose first language is actually Mixteco, but who's speaking in Spanish because that is the language that's being interpreted, and actually have this whole sort of like create this understanding and this realization about what the space and the history they're sitting in, but also what their relationship in moving that forward is. So again, that was really a really key part. So I was living and working in Koreatown, but my second home, or the space that I was part of in a really weird, complicated way was actually in Boyle Heights. And I don't know how familiar folks are with Boyle Heights in LA, or what's happening right now around the discussions of gentrification and displacement, but it's really tense. I don't even say tense, it's violent, because violence is going on in the communities. Gentrification, displacement is violence. So folks are responding like people do when your community is being violated, when your community is being attacked and colonized, right? So I want to say that because there's a lot of sort of sensationalizing of what's happening in Boyle Heights, and it's actually like a very, very complicated, but also I think a really important way for us to talk about both art and also issues around place and space in general, right? This is the now infamous fuckboy art graffiti at the Nicodem Gallery. So if folks watch Vida, they kind of had an episode in it. It was really, really bad, actually. This is a very bad understanding of it. But again, this was part of the context, right? So galleries were moving into Boyle Heights, which had been traditionally, well, it started out as a Jewish and Japanese neighborhood, but more recently, in the last few decades, turned into a mainly Chicanx, Latinx, working class, Mexican, and Central American community, right? And so you have all these galleries, these like that are we're not talking about like, oh, I really like art, let me, rent a shop and display art. We're talking about galleries that had millions of dollars in investment, right? From these giant developers. So this was all speculative, like capitalism sort of like undertaking, saying like, oh, art, this is something that everyone likes. This is something that's really benign, and actually using it to come into the communities, because when you have galleries like PSST, when you have galleries like decoding, and so many others that again are like backed by multi-million-dollar developers and investors, and who have all of these resources, it's not only increasing the property values, but it's also making a statement about whose art, who is an artist, who gets to be called an artist, whose arts get to be valuable, and also who gets to claim to that space, right? This is another, I would say, not the beginning, but I think one of the, sort of the inception of BAD, which is the Boyle Heights Alliance Against Art Washing and Displacement. And this was a group that I was part of, that I accidentally helped co-found, again, by virtue of being the interpreter in a lot of meetings, could see me in spaces, put me in spaces that I never thought I would be in when I was in LA. But this is actually myself and my comrade Jen, doing the announcement, the language justice announcement for the space. And this is at Pico Gardens, which is a public housing complex in Boyle Heights. The thing about our role in this work, right, and what we saw ourselves doing, and San Los Angeles was at that point working, there was a residency at the Hammer. We were working with LACMA, we were being asked by the main museum, which now they've got, and then the ICALA, the folks are actually coming to us, oh, we want to make this bilingual, we're opening this new collection, we want to make sure it's bilingual and accessible. And again, and these were, main museum was a pet project of a giant developer that was responsible for a lot of the displacement and evictions, and just, not just evictions from homes, but evictions from space, around downtown and Skid Row, and sort of the revitalization, right, of LA. And the other was ICALA, which again had a similar sort of context and background of being near one of the Northeast communities. And so what we were doing, we were in those spaces, we're also in these spaces, where this was actually a meeting that the community members had with some of the owners from PSST Gallery and Nicodem Gallery. I think those were the two that showed up. And everything, and when we think about translation and interpretation, a lot of folks, it's like, oh, well, we're going to make a bilingual space. Let's get someone to interpret for the people who don't speak English, right? But I think what we meant by solidarity work through language justice was that we were just actually interpreters. We were actually going to create a space such that, right, the community members who did not speak English, who did not have access to formal education in a lot of the times, and where the ones being pushed out of this community had a chance to actually be, I don't know if it's on the same level, but to shift the power dynamic between these mostly white, upper middle class, highly educated, resource gallery owners that were coming in to have a conversation, right? Like, a conversation is not, when you have that imbalance in power, it's not a conversation. And so I think what language helped us do in this space, and what our work at Centennial Sanchez was to actually shift the power in that space. And it wasn't just, you'd see some people wearing interpretation headsets, we're sitting in a circle. It's at Pico Gardens, not at the gallery's office or space, which they were inviting people to go there. And so I think when I think of space and language, these are the things that I'm talking about, right? Like, language is not neutral, and space is not neutral either. And so when we're talking about placemaking, when we're talking about like what are interventions, I think those are things that I keep in mind. And just really quickly, a quote from so there's a great article, folks haven't read it, I highly recommend it, Magdalena Miranda and Caroline McKinley. It's a blade of grass, and this was again part of what kind of led me to the guiding questions in this project. Is whose social practices gets to count as art, and who gets to have housing, right? These are just very, very simple questions. A lot of what I was reading in newspapers at that time was really framing the issue around, oh, art versus housing, like what's better, what's more important, what's like, and I think that was not the question. The question was, who's an artist, who's art, right? And who gets to have this ticket in housing? Language is a weapon, language as a weapon. I actually think that language was a wound, and we used to talk about my language wound as someone who came to the US, who had to learn English, who had to interpret for his parents, and had to sort of be in that in-between. But I now think of language as a weapon, right? And another thing too that informs the work that I do is that you cannot talk about language, especially on this continent, especially in this country, especially in this physical space that we're at, without talking about colonization, right? Language has been the most powerful and effective weapon of colonization in oppressing, in erasing, and annihilating, controlling Native communities and other communities that were not part of that, of the people in power. And so I think, again, as I said, language, when I'm thinking about language, I'm thinking about spoken language, I'm thinking about sign, tactile, but I'm also thinking about the ways that other parts of our lives that constitute our language, right? I talk about language dominance, especially in a country like the US, as if you don't speak English, you want to make a doctor's appointment at Legacy Clinic right now. If you don't speak English, you want to enroll in classes at HCC right now. If you don't speak English and you want to go testify at City Hall as a citizen or resident of the city, what are your options? Or what is that process like, right? And for folks like myself, like other people I see here, we know that one, usually there is no process, there is no wait, and when there is a process or a wait, it's so convoluted and long and inaccessible that folks are shut out of these, what for a lot of us could be just basic needs, basic services, because of this language dominance and linguicism, right? And lastly, I want to talk about language justice as the tool, one of the frameworks that I and colleagues in this work use to push back against this language dominance and linguicism and ongoing colonization, which is the idea that we all have the right to speak in the languages in which we feel most comfortable, to be heard, understood, and to understand, right? That sounds so basic and simple, but it's so inaccessible to so many people who live in this country, in this world. Not just that, but also the creation of multilingual spaces where no one language has to dominate over the other. When folks who are coming into who don't speak English aren't the ones that are given the headset, told to sit in the back, someone's going to whisper to you, you're stigmatized, and sort of, you can passively listen to the conversation, but you actually wouldn't be able to be part of that, right? So, things I'm thinking about. I also think about Sol Lewitt's work and the idea that language itself, right, that ideas can be works of art, and that language used to create ideas is in a lot of ways in itself art, right? Both in terms of conversations we have, but I love this example that I was just thinking of, reminding me of the kitchen. So like food recipes are just like these beautiful, intimate, radical pieces of conceptual art. What could be more intimate and more also can have more possibilities than a food recipe that you write that someone else is going to open up in their kitchen, and what they are actually going to create is going to be something completely different. But here you are, this person who wrote it, guiding them, like movement by movement, ingredient by ingredient, like just piece by piece. And you've never met, you don't know each other. There's like this. So yeah, so thinking about language as and ideas as they themselves pieces of art. And lastly, another part of the language piece that informs my work is I've been really fortunate to be part of Los Angeles and then Houston, denied it, and just the super, super amazing collectives that really explore how critical use of language can help us reimagine and re-articulate the worlds that we inhabit, right? And when I say reimagine, when I think of re-articulate, I think of like, in the beginning there was a word, and like you can speak, like so much of what we can speak into existence comes through this process, right? So wanting to explore that a little more. I don't know how I am on time, but I'm probably near the end, so I'm just gonna talk. These are just some examples of food as confrontation. Food as confrontation. When I was growing up in Mexico, every morning my aunt would wake up. Well, the night before she would make the nixtamal, then grind it, then she would wake up and have the masa and make the tortillas by hand, and I would go into there, like, she would talk to me, we'd share stories. She'd make me what she would call una ranita, like a little frog, which is basically just like a fresh made tortilla, like right off the comal, with a sprinkle of salt and a little water. Just, I guess, like moisten it, like roll it up, and that was my little snack as I went to school, right? So when Nicoleta was talking about the just food, the alchemy of food, but also the kitchen is a cathedral, this was my cathedral. This was where I went every morning to pray, to start my day, to be thankful for what I had and what I wanted to do. Yeah, so I see that piece too. This is, I don't know if folks have seen this image before as well, but this is actually the recovered or re-excavated kitchen in Monticello that was where James Hemings used to cook, right? And again, James Hemings is someone who just, the more I've been learning about the story of his life and the legacy that it's like basically food in the US, American food, is thanks to this man who was enslaved, who was owned by Thomas Jefferson, right? One of the writers of the Declaration of Independence, one of our former presidents. American food is essentially thanks to this level of ingenuity. And so bringing that into this piece as well. Food as confrontation is literally the sit-ins at the lunch counters, right? This is an image from just here in Houston, actually in Alameda, so not too far from here. This is another example I wanted to share, a hunger strike at, so immigrant folks who were detained at this detention center in Tacoma. This actually happened many times at the Tacoma Center and also many times in other detention centers around the country. But it's not just the food as confrontation, but it becomes this discourse, right? Where like folks who are detained are not eating, are hunger strike, and then the guards are force feeding them, right? There is it's this sort of back and forth. Similarly with it's at the lunch counter, there's a response, right? There's going to be a response. Folks, another example of food as confrontation, right? And in this in particular, we're talking about criminalization, but we're talking about food in public space. This was a Lake Merritt. This was like, we're not talking about, I mean, not that it would be okay anyway, right? But yeah, bring that in. Again, just one bringing confrontation, which I think has also just been really important in my development of the project. Thinking of imperialism, again, thinking of conflict, food. Chef Johnny Rhodes, I don't know if folks have gotten to go to Indigo yet. It's actually my neighborhood. I live very close, Ferry Street. But again, the more I learn about the space, and I mean, when that fellowship check hits, I'm gonna go and spend $130. But yeah, but the idea, right, that the ingenuity, the creation of the intentionality of the creation of this space to share, right, like this legacy of soul food in a way that's confronting people, not in a way that's like, hey, come taste this really cool thing, let's have a conversation, but being in your face about something that you know to be true and something that you know its importance. So lastly, just going to share my questions. So what I wanted to do in exploring food and language in the report was ask questions like, what institutions like Alfredo Soul Food, This Is It, and French's Chicken have to say about the neighborhood's past? What can newer places like Doshi House, Green Eats, and So Vegan tell us about its future? And what about some of those harder voices here, right? Like the front yard barbecue, or the chicken fry that feeds the neighbors, or the boudin or pies that get made and sold out of someone's kitchen. Likewise, how do these places also tie into the long traditions and realities in the community, such as Black veganism, Rastafari, etc.? I'd be remiss if I did not mention this. This is my last slide. Turkey, like I submitted the proposal, and I had been thinking about this idea, and I submitted the proposal about a month and a half before this happened. But when I was thinking about a language of food and food as confrontation, when the lawsuit happened with the Turkey Like Hut, when just the whole drama of it started to spiral out around like who was suing, why, like who, what, I just thought like, wow, I have to do this. If I don't get the scholarship, I'm gonna figure out another way to keep doing this because, yeah, I just, again, want to ask those questions and hope that folks want to ask more questions with me, right? Thank you so much.